If you're curious about what it's like to live in a tiny house, or you're interested in hearing an inspiring story that will leave you with bits of wisdom that will cause you to feel inspired, then this is the episode for you. Hey, it's Ange, and I'm super excited to bring this episode to you because we're going to be hearing from my neighbor. Her name is Susan Shipe. She also lives in a tiny home. She's a faith blogger and she's an author of many books, and she has so much wisdom to offer. If you're listening right now and you're wondering if you should keep listening because maybe you're not interested in living in a tiny house, I'm going to say you definitely should, because this conversation, when I was listening back on it, I was like, this makes me feel like I'm right there with someone having coffee or tea or beverage of choice, and you're having a meaningful conversation about life. So in this episode, we're going to hear about how someone like a non-minimalist, Susan does not identify as a minimalist, how she's been able to simplify her life to live in a tiny house. And just some background info is that I'm also going to share my journey of living in a tiny house and how I went from living in a 4-bedroom, 2-bathroom, upstairs, downstairs home to how I live now in this tiny space. The same thing with Susan. She went from a big farmhouse to living in a tiny house. So I think that journey in and of itself is interesting because it can get you to be thinking about, what's really important to you in your life. Maybe you don't need to go live in a tiny house, but simplifying your life to focus more on what is more important to you, to honor your values more. That's just something good to think about. We're also going to be talking about praying for what you want and listening to the signs, writing books about your life and inspiring others, what really makes up a home, what we do differently now that we know what we know, and some living in a small space hacks that we've learned along the way. So if you're interested in being more intentional about your space, that might be helpful to you as well. All right, so let's get right to it. Here we go. All right, so on the show today, we have Susan Shipe. She's actually my neighbor, and she lives in a tiny home as well. And I brought her on the show because I wanted y'all to hear her journey of how she has gone tiny and just her perspective. I think Lowell, and that's her husband, and Susan are some of the most fun and interesting people I know. So I think you'll really enjoy hearing from Susan. So Susan, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Angela. I'm glad to be here.
So tell us a little more about you. So I know that you're an author. You have wrote many books. You're a grandma. Like I said before, you live in a tiny house, but what else?
Well, if I'm a grandma, then I'm also a mother of 3 kids, 3 adult children. And I also work full time as a customer service manager for a small manufacturing company. I'm from New Jersey originally, and I can't get rid of the New Jersey voice. However, I only lived there for like 8 years, and I transplanted to Florida, and then I transplanted to North Carolina. And now, of course, we're in upstate South Carolina in our tiny house. And it's been a long journey.
Yeah, to switch to the tiny home living aspect. What about your books? Tell us about what those are about.
I'm a faith blogger, and I write mostly devotions. I've written a few children's books. I've written a family memoir with my sister, which is the story of our life and the story of our parents and our grandparents. And this book is available on Amazon. However, how many people are interested in our family. But it is a very interesting book, and our children and our grandchildren, and my sister has great-grandchildren, they love that book because it tells them where they come from and some of their quirky little ways and manners actually come from their grandparents, which they didn't even know. So that's kind of fun. And we have lots of pictures in it. It's a great book. We love that book.
And that book is
We
such a blessing to your family.
Yes.
And I would love to have something like that from my family and to know all of that. So it inspires me because it makes me think about like, I want to write something like this so my kids and their future kids and all of them have that story and know where we came from, what our life was like. So I think that's pretty awesome.
Oh, I think it's incredibly important. We have a grandson who's 6'5", and one day he'll sit down and read that book and learn that his great, 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 I think, grandpa was 6'8". So he's
Oh,
going to know
wow.
where that came from. And yeah, it's just it's so neat to know why we do the things we do.
Mm-hmm.
And a memoir can certainly shed a lot of light on that.
Yeah.
And I write devotionals. I love to write devotionals. I will just pick one topic and usually write about a 31-day book.
Mm-hmm. So, what about your recent book, your most recent book?
My most recent book. I wrote on what I call the real Lord's Prayer from the Gospel of John, chapter 17. It's the prayer Jesus prayed to his heavenly Father on the way to the cross.
Wow. So you wrote this book just recently then, because I know you wrote your tiny house book too.
Yes, Tiny House came before John 17. So
I can't
yes,
keep up with you, Susan. You're writing so many books. I love
okay,
it.
my Tiny House book is called From Farm to Flat to Tiny House. And that's the progression of our move to this tiny house.
So today in the show, we're probably going to dive into some of the things that you have in that book.
Good.
So my question for you is, what got you interested in living in a tiny house?
Okay. It goes back a little bit, so bear with me. 10, 15 years ago, Lowell was fascinated with tiny houses. He bought the book by, wish I could think of his name, but I can't. He was the original tiny house designer. And what Lowell wanted to do was build tiny houses on our 14 acres and maybe rent them out as vacation homes. Well, that never came to fruition. It never happened. But when we sold our farm in the mountains of North Carolina, we bought a casita travel trailer. And we moved into an apartment in Statesville near my children. And in July and August of 2019, we traveled to Alaska. We took 5 weeks and traveled. Oh my goodness, it was a long road trip, but it was a great road trip. And even though we were very happy living in our apartment, and it was a big apartment, it was great. When I was in Alaska one Sunday afternoon, Lowell was out deep sea fishing. And I was talking to my sister back home, and she lives in Florida. And she said, well, have you had any epiphanies on this trip? And I'm always having revelations and epiphanies. And I said, yeah, I have. I said, I think I want to own a home again. And she said, really? I never thought I'd hear you say that. I said, well, I think so. I think, but it doesn't, I don't know what that looks like yet. But I think we want to own something again. I said, I didn't say we, I actually said I, because I hadn't even brought this up to my husband yet. So anyway, we left Alaska and we were about 2 days into our week-long road trip. And I said, Lowell, I said, I think we should own a house again. He said, what? I said, I do. We're throwing a lot of money away on rent, and I think we should become homeowners again. He said, And like what? What do you think we should do? I said, well, definitely not a condo because we're not condo people. I said, what would you think of if we seriously looked at buying or building a tiny house? Well, he was all over it. He about went off the road in excitement. He said, yes, yes, let's explore that when we get back home. So we got back to North Carolina, and it took a good month for us to kind of recuperate. Lowell did all the driving on that trip. We traveled 13,000 hard road miles, and he rested and did the things that Lowell does, which is so many things I can't even explain them all. But as you know, being a neighbor. So we decided one Sunday morning, I said, let's drive over to South Carolina to where my friend lives. And do you remember the tiny house village she drove us through? He said, I do. He said, yes, let's go. And we got in the car or the truck and we came over. It's about a 2-hour drive from where we used to live. And we went into the tiny house village off of Highway 101. And we drove around and we were looking at all the different little houses. And I said, what do you think? He said, well, I would love to see inside one. So on a tree, there was a sign, call this number. So I called and I talked to a woman named Katie, and she was on her way out the door to go hiking. But she told us of a model home that had a key hidden, and we were more than welcome to go there, which was in that same little community we were driving around in. So we went, we parked the car, and we walked in the front door, and it was all air conditioned, so it was very comfortable. It was September. And we walked around, went up in the loft, came back down, and we sat in the living room. And I looked at him, and he looked at me. I said, I think I could do this. He says, oh, I think we could do this very well. He said, after all, we've just been on a 5-week camping trip and lived in 84 square feet. And this tiny house had 399 square feet. So it felt like a mansion. And we looked around again. We sat there for a very long time, at least an hour. And we went home. We went back to the apartment. And we started kind of putting our ducks in a row, trying to figure out how we could do it. And we're not people of wealth. So, you have to kind of finagle and shift things around a little bit. Mm-hmm. And we said, well, if such and such happens, we will know that buying a tiny house is the way we're supposed to go. So I'm not going to talk too much about the such and such, but I always call that throwing out a fleece, which is a biblical term, and I won't explain that. But so we did what we did, some due diligence, and the such and such happened within 2 days. And it was like, oh my gosh, this was like a postcard from heaven.
What, Susan, you got to tell us what the such and such was.
Oh, we had, well, we had owned some property in Florida for years, many, many years. And it was property near Cape Canaveral or Cape Kennedy. I don't even know what they call it anymore. Cape Canaveral, I think. And we had tried to sell it before, but never could. And because the space program in the United States took such a downward turn during an administration of a certain president that our property was really valueless. Mm-hmm. And but things were different that day and now. And so we put it on the market. and we sold it within 2 days. And we got,
Wow.
yes, and we made money on it. And that was our answer. Yes, we
Yeah.
can buy a tiny house. So literally, we made the phone call. We agreed. We arranged to meet Katie again, and we drove over and we gave her a big check, and we started picking out colors and wood and all those things, and decided on a model that we both like. And as they say, the rest is history.
I love that story. It reminds me of like how Ian and I found the tiny house as well and decided we wanted to live in it. We looked at one of the models too, and we sat there and we like were in that little living room and we're like, we
Yes,
could do this. And then we
yes.
started getting our ducks in a row like you. And the thing that was surprising to me was just even the cost of it, because there's a lot of misconceptions around like how much a tiny home is going to cost. Like for some reason people tend to think that they're super cheap, as far as like a shed cost. Like I don't know why,
Right.
but that's what people think, and it's like no, like, and it can be really challenging to get a tiny home loan. So for us, we had to figure out like how are we going to make this work, and we had to like move some of our savings around. We had to borrow money from two different kinds of loans, and yeah, but where there's a will there's a way. And it happened.
Yes.
And I think it was like you, like it was we saw these signs and I felt like we were getting led into like the community
That's
where we
right.
are now.
I mean, I love to do that because being a person of faith, I mean, when I pray for something specific, I say, Lord, just either open the door wide or roadblock it in every
Mm-hmm.
manner, because I don't want to walk through the wrong door. I never have wanted to do that. We did that once in our life, and I did not want to do that again. And so this time we dotted our I's and we crossed our T's, and it worked. It
See,
worked beautifully.
that was the same thing with us, is like we actually had made we got a house, or it didn't officially go through yet. We were in the inspection process. Like they accepted our offer and we went through this inspection process, and I was just like praying about it and was like, if this is for us, let it be. If it's not, like make it super clear that it's not for us. And it came back
That's
after the
right.
inspection, and there was so many issues that were wrong with it, and
Oh,
there was like signs with like the people we were talking to, just things didn't jive very well. And I'm like, I think we really need to let this go. And Ian was like, well, what are we going to do? Like, we need somewhere to live. And I'm like, we're going to figure it. And then at night, so we had this low budget. And I remember one night, I put filters on as far as like houses in the area based on where he was going to be working or within like a 30-ish minute radius. And I put the filters around the amounts, and we wanted to start to like reduce the amount of debt and things that we had. So we really didn't want to go in debt like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars.
oh gosh. Yes.
Even though people were pressuring, like the realtors were kind of like pressuring us to do that. And they're like, you're not going to find something nice, that you'd even want to live in at the budget that you guys even want. So I still had those filters on, and they're kind of right, like in a lot of ways. But I was not seeing anything. It was complete garbage at the range that we were looking at. And I remember one night I got this like ping, and I was like, oh, there's something new that popped up that's in our range. And I clicked on it, and it was a tiny house. And I was like,
Oh my.
what? So that's how I first found out about the community. And we went and seen it in the bigger community where like you guys did. And then we toured the other one, the model, and we liked that. And we wanted to live in the smaller community, and that's how we end up where we are. But I remember even like telling Ian about it, and he was initially like, we are not going to live in a tiny house. No. And I'm like, can you just entertain me? Like, let's just go see it. We don't need to even live in it. I'm just really curious about it. We did. And then
Oh,
when we were there, I felt like he was like, yeah, like we could do this once he saw it. So for everyone that's listening, we highly recommend that you go into the space and just see, because there's a lot of misconceptions people have around, like if you're with someone that might have resistance towards it, there's a lot of misconceptions where people think that the space isn't very livable. You're not going to be comfortable there. Like, have you seen on your end, Susan, like when people come into your space, because you and Lowell are so like welcoming to allow people to see your space, because you know what it's like. You were that person that was curious around what things looked like
Right.
and how you can set up your space to make it work for you and all that. But have you found that people come into your space and they're like, whoa, this is actually like, I could live in here. Like, this is a lot bigger than what I thought it would be,
I
or
think every
spacious.
single person that's come in, and we get a lot of, we call them lookers, especially on the weekend, and they'll go around the circle maybe twice. And if Lowell's outside, Lowell talks to everybody. I don't, but he does. And he'll get talking, and he'll say, "Well, sure, you can come in." And we're pretty neat people, so I never mind. My bed's always made,
Yeah.
and my dishes are always, so I don't mind people coming in. And they'll walk in, they go, "Oh my gosh, well, we could do this."
Mm-hmm.
They'll look around, and I am not a minimalist at all. I mean, my daughter told me, "You better never call yourself a minimalist," because I'm not. I like things. I do like things. And I love to cook. So my kitchen it's a working kitchen. And, I've got utensils and a tray of vitamins and, all the things. And so I'm not trying to come across as a minimalist. I would say you are, and you do it well, but I am not, and we are not. So,
Well, I'm glad that you're sharing that, because I think too, people think that, if they really love their stuff and it's important to them, sometimes they're like, oh, well, I couldn't live in a tiny house because like I don't want to get rid of all my things. And I think you and Lowell are a very good example of how you can live in a tiny home space and have it not be cluttered, but like still have the things that you love in that space. And it's
yes,
all about like how you use your space, because for those that are listening, like everyone basically that doesn't know Lowell, like Lowell is a multi-passionate human being. There's a lot of things that he loves. He's out there
yes,
putting stones in the shed, his gemstones, and he's just like
right
always.
now.
Is he really?
Yes,
As we speak, that's what he's doing. But it's fun to see, because I feel like he's lived like a gazillion lives and has so much experience from all of that. And the same thing with you, like you have your passions around. I mean, just your books alone is going to take up enough space. Like, how many books have you written now, Susan?
25.
See, it's insane. Like, so I want people to know that you can still have all your passions, you can still love all the things and bring them into your space. And you just got to be intentional about how you do it. Cause I still feel like, even though you guys don't identify as minimalist, I would say you're very intentional about how you do things.
Very intentional. Yeah, I will claim that tag. We are.
So, how do you feel like your life has changed since you've moved into the tiny home, like for the better?
Well, the best way for me to explain it, and this is what I say to people, we live small. No, no, wait a minute. Let me think. How do I say that? We live small, but we have a big life.
Mm-hmm.
That's and I would say that's true about us. And believe me, we're home most of the time because I do work. I work full time, and but we love to go places. We like to just get in the car on Saturday morning and not even know where we're going, and just kind of spin the dial and say, "Oh, that way."
Yeah.
And but another thing is budget wise. I love to help people, and being a Christian, I love to give, and so we're able to do a lot of giving to ministries and missionaries,
Mm-hmm.
and we love to do that, and we do. My husband will say to me, "Now, Suze, don't give away the store," but I don't think we ever could, because whatever we give, we get back in so many different ways. But
Yeah.
we're not bothered with um, we're just not bothered with all the peripheral stuff that owning a big, I mean, we've owned 14 acres, we've raised dairy goats, we've had a 1,000-foot workshop. We've done all that. We've had organic gardens, and we sold vegetables to restaurants. We've done all that, and it was wonderful. It was wonderful for that season. But we just want to now just lock the door, and if we want to, get in our travel trailer and go somewhere.
Yeah. So
And
it's
we
like,
can do that.
because now it's like, even financially, like living in the spaces that we do, like our cost of living is a lot lower, so it allows us the ability to give more, to travel more, and all of that stuff. So I think that's what draws a lot of people to the tiny house lifestyle, is that you free up your finances in a sense more, so that you can do these other things that bring you so much joy, that are also in alignment with your values.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. And it's so cool to hear your guys' story, because you came from having a bigger home, from having this farm, and then making this transition, and still saying, like, I really enjoy this.
Yes.
And you
And
still
let
have
me
oh, go
go
ahead.
ahead. Well, one of the real motivators for us, for me, was my mother passed away in 2012, and my mother had no worldly possessions. So when my sister and I cleaned out her little apartment, it was so simple. And one day I was at our home up in the mountains, and I walked out to Lowell's workshop. Now, Lowell. So, and the people that are listening do not know Lowell. But Lowell has, oh my gosh, he had a workshop where he built boats, he restored boats, he turned wood on a lathe, he is a competition black powder gun shooter. I don't know if there's a real term for that. So he made his own bullets and all his own rounds. His wood shop was over 900 square feet, and it was, oh my gosh, it was so full. He had clamps, because you can't build a boat without a clamp. He probably had 400 clamps
Oh,
hanging
wow.
from a beam in there. And I looked around, and I said, oh my gosh, my daughter is going to kill us if we die. I mean, quote unquote, she will, she will curse our existence if she has to come here and clean this out by herself. And
Yeah.
it just bothered me so much, so much. And I said that to Lowell. I said, Lowell, now look, we've got, between us, we have 5 children. Um, 4 boys and 1 girl. And guess who would have gotten the job? The girl, because girls usually do.
Mm-hmm.
And I just couldn't do that to her. And I don't know. We just started talking about selling that place, and that place had our heart, our I mean, our souls were there. They were. And but Lowell said, it's time. And we agreed. And when I say that our souls live there, it's funny, because 2 weeks before we closed on that house, the house was empty, and we were in the apartment about 90 minutes away. And we had to go to a wedding at our church, our mountain church. And we took our grandchildren, and they begged us to take us to the house one more time, because these kids grew up there. They spent their summers there. And so that was grandma, Mimi and Pop Pop's house. And we walked in to an empty shell of a house, and they looked around. And my grandson, who was very perceptive. He said, "Wow, it's not even like the same house." And
Mhm.
I looked at him. I could almost get emotional. I said, "That's because our spirit is no longer here."
Mhm.
And they agreed. It was just a house. It was just a house then.
Yeah.
When we lived there, our very spirit and soul lived there. And we had, oh my goodness, we had the best memories from there. Bonfires and hikes and making ice cream and, raising baby goats and feeding them with bottles. And
Aw.
but the season change, our seasons change.
Yeah.
And now we just we're happy to go out on our beautiful back deck and listen to the hawk screech.
Yeah.
So we still love all that stuff.
But
I'll contain myself. You talk for a while.
well, what I loved about that is it reminds me of the whole saying, like, wherever home is, wherever you are, wherever the
That's
people
right.
are. And I love thinking about that because I think a lot of times people can get really attached to a specific like physical thing, but it's really
Oh,
not a physical
yes.
thing. It's you made it home because of the spirits that your guys' spirits and what you brought in there and into that
That's
space.
right.
Yeah, like
That's right. And it
your
is
soul.
just a shell. And now when they come here, they feel that same joy
Yeah, that's what the
because
other
this
thing I
is
was
where
gonna
we
say
are.
is because like where you are now, like sometimes I think too people think that if I move into a tiny house, then like how do I host events or have people over? And in our community, we can attest to the fact that in your tiny home space, you can have people over. You can have your
Yes.
family over. You can create a space where you guys all love it. And having the tiny home for me has made it so it's also like sparked joy for other people because they're excited to come to the tiny house to see it.
Oh, there.
And then
Yes.
all of us have like outdoor seating areas because we want like I see your family over all the time visiting you guys or you guys sitting outside and you have your little even hot tub set up like you can
Right.
make this work for you.
That's
Like I
right.
think sometimes people don't realize that and it's hard to imagine when you haven't seen other people do it, and that's why I wanted to share more of these stories so we can really inspire more people to step back and kind of like not be so obsessed with all this material stuff and having more
Oh
and
my
more and
gosh.
bigger and better, and really just focusing more on what really matters, like the way you show up in love, your experiences, your
Yes.
relationships, stuff that you can't put a dollar value on.
When I see a big house now, I look and I love to look at houses. I mean, I just love all that. But I think, oh my gosh, think of all the stuff in there.
Yeah,
Oh,
I'm
and I don't
glad.
want to be bogged down with stuff.
I'm so glad you brought that up because I love how you look at it as far as like how you're thinking beyond just you. Like your kids are going to have to deal with all of this stuff.
That's right.
It's hard enough like for someone
It
to lose
is.
their parents and to go through that, but then to have the extra stress to have to get rid of a bunch of stuff and go through the emotions of that, and then also just feeling overwhelmed and already feeling lower energy because you're grieving, but then you have to deal with getting rid of all this stuff. And I don't think
Oh,
people realize that. Like a lot of people are like, I love my children, but they're not thinking about how their children's going to have to deal with all their crap. And they would, in their normal mind, they're like, they would never want to cause a burden on their children. That would be the last thing most people would ever want to do. But your stuff, an excessive amount of it's going to fall back on somebody.
it does. It does. And my children or my grandchildren might not want grandma's milk glass candy dish,
Mm-hmm.
but would they throw it away? Oh my gosh. Think of the guilt that would
Oh,
create.
that is such
So
a great
when
point.
oh, it's huge. And when we left the apartment in Statesville, North Carolina, to come here, that was our big clean out. I mean, this was it. This was our magnum opus of cleaning. And all through the years of Hannah and Simon, spending summers with us, they would see things that belonged to, say, my grandparents, and they'd say, Mims, I would like that when you go to heaven. So you know what I did? I made piles, and I said, kids, guess what? You don't even have to wait until I'm in heaven. I want you to have these now. And
Yeah.
and I gave it to them. And you know what? They love it. They can love those things now and not be sad because,
Yeah.
well, number one, I'm still here. And but oh, it's such a good feeling to see their little faces light up and say, remember grandma's writing chest from,
Mm-hmm.
I'm telling you, it was from the late 1800s. It was beautiful. I said, you can have that now. I can? I said, yes, yes, take it home.
Yeah.
So
'Cause
that was such a blessing.
that is a blessing. I love that you're sharing this. I don't hear a lot of people talk about it, especially from the perspective of someone who has let go of a lot of items and has been very intentional about what you kept and what you gave and your mindset around what you're leaving behind for your kids as far as even
Right.
the burdens and the blessings and all
And
that.
it's not even expensive antique things that if I love something, in fact, I'm looking right now on my bookshelf in my office. I have this TJ Maxx pencil pen holder, little piece of ceramic that says write, WRITE. You know what? I love that. And it sits right up here with my pens, and it reminds me I'm to write.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not even expensive things. It's just
Yeah.
the things that really that I love, whether it's great grandma's candy dish or whether it's TJ Maxx's pen canister.
Mm-hmm. It
And
sparks that
that's
joy for
that's
you.
it is. It's just something that you got to come to terms with that though.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for a lot of people, especially like where we came from in the mountains, people are so soul tied to things. Oh, and that
Mm-hmm.
is not something I wanted to be.
Yeah, same here. And I've seen that with a lot of people too. And it's just it's interesting because the people that I've seen who I believe are the most joy filled people that I know, they're not attached to material items or things. Like there's certain things that they have that they really love and that bring joy to them, but they don't have this mindset of I need more and more and bigger and better. Like that's
Oh
not
no,
giving out, you know?
no, that's well, I mean, we could get very philosophical here, but those people they're filling something that they don't
Exactly.
even know why it's empty.
Yeah. And something like for me that like energetically, I feel like that has changed for me is I think that I feel so much lighter and free since I've moved into the tiny house. Like
Yes,
all this, I don't know how to describe it, but I just feel so much more joy and peace.
yeah. I don't know what that is, Angela, but if we could learn to bottle it, we could buy a lot of tiny houses for a lot of people.
Yeah, exactly. That is completely true.
It is
So
true.
what about since you've made this transition, is there anything that now that you know what it's like that you would do differently now that you know what you know or that you'd recommend to others?
Oh, I really don't think there is. Keep the things you love, get rid of the things you don't care about, and make sure that when you and this is just something very practical. Look at all your options of tiny. There are so many
Yes.
different tiny house models now, and honestly, there's one that I like better than the one we have. And
Mm-hmm.
I wish I had seen it before we bought this. I mean, I will say that. But But you know what? I mean, we're certainly not going to sell this and change our minds. No, no way. But just really investigate it and make sure. Oh, and definitely if you have a spouse or a partner, you make sure you're both on the same page.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're not, as it would be in any situation, if someone's not happy, nobody's happy.
Especially, yeah, and when you're in that small space, you really gotta be mindful of that. And I would say, someone asked me this same question before, like, what would I do differently, or what would I recommend to others now that I've gone through the same journey? And my advice was the same thing as you, to really do your research around, take the time with it, to look at different models, to see how people are living in their space. Because like you, Ian and I were like, dang, I wish I would have seen that model before, that other one, because I like that one more. But we don't regret what we have now. But the other thing too I'd recommend is that you think about yourself as a person and the things that truly bring you joy and the activities that you want to continue to engage in. So like for me, obviously podcasting, or just like like having the space for me to exercise. I'm big about, I love having people, like hosting things and being with community, and I wanted to make sure our space allowed for that. I wanted to make sure that I had a space where I could do my podcast. And I also wanted to make sure that Ian and I both were able to do the things that we love in our small space, which is why he goes upstairs and he jams out in his music. And then he like, for fun, I'm not even kidding, this guy. So for those that are listening that don't know this, my husband is a dentist, and he likes to like look at cases, like on other people's dental cases, and he obsesses about reading this. I'm like, this is fun for him, but apparently it is. Or he listens to music with his headphones, and
I love it.
So it's nice that he has a space where he can scroll looking at teeth stuff and listen to his music. And then I have my space where I can write. Like, I wanted my chair so I could write and listen to my podcast. This is really important because it's just like you have your space where you can do your writing. You have your desk area for your work stuff because you are working from home. And then Lowell has the whole shed that he's doing his gemstone stuff in. Plus he's always outside. Lowell's on an adventure every day. So I mean, he's got plenty of space in the community to roam and do his stuff. But this stuff is important to consider. Like, I think your other loved ones in the space, even your animals, making sure that it's set up for you to have them, enjoy the space. Like, is there a dog area? If you have a dog, like with our cats, we had those shelves on top so that they could go sit and look at
yes, and I love that.
And the screen porch, like, that's huge. So there's so many creative things that you can do, but I think just stepping into it, know what's important to you, design your home around what's important to you, and do the research, and even shop around for like pricing and things, because when you first step into it, it's hard to really know what makes sense for pricing. And it just depends on how, like, even now, like the cost of wood has gone up significantly with COVID, and it's just hard to figure out what price things are. And then there's other things, like we all had to learn about insurance and getting these things insured, and probably will change in the future because that can be challenging. The loans can be challenging. You just got to do your research and be patient with the process, and know that but it's, I guess this is my own mindset, that it's always happening for you, like as things unfold, and to pay attention to the signs like you did, like I did through this process.
And ask people, like when people come in here, and we've had a lot of people just come in and look. I think they're just nosy, really. But nosy, well, there are, how that goes. But like the furniture that you can and you cannot have. IKEA is a tiny house owner's best friend. I mean, for us, I look around and I think I have IKEA something in every one of my rooms. So, and then people ask, what's the hardest thing about living in a tiny house? And I'm my hands raised. I have the answer. It's making our bed.
That's so funny. I was really curious. I'm like, what is your answer? Because I think for me, if someone said, what is the hardest thing about living in a tiny house? Honestly, like I don't feel like much is hard about it because I just feel so much joy and peace in it. I think initially, figuring out where things were gonna go, like even the canned
Yes.
goods and like that was hard. But once you get your own stuff made and you figure it out, and like even when I was like, where does my broom go? Where does my dustpan and where
Right.
does my garbage go? Like these little things that you don't think about, but you make it
Oh,
work and
it's so
you
true.
know,
But making the bed,
making the bed.
oh,
But
it just
that's
drives me crazy, especially on sheet changing day.
Oh yeah. That's the thing for me though. I will say cuz well Ian and I sleep upstairs in the loft and obviously it's shorter up there, but like even changing things up there, that can be a little more complicated. Um
Right.
yeah, I'm trying to think of what else has been a challenge. Oh,
Difficult.
yeah, like I guess stocking up on a lot of stuff. Like I don't stock up as much on things, which I
No, you
kind of
can't do
like.
that.
I kind of like it though because then I'm not like hoarding about because like when you start to stock up too much on stuff, you forget what you have and all of that. And I don't really have that problem. And I do love that we have the shed because for us, we love
Yes.
outdoorsy activities and that was essential. Like for us to live in a tiny house, I need the shed to put our bikes and our hiking gear and
Yes.
all of that. Even we have a bin that has we switch out our winter and clothes and summer
Yes.
clothes and
Yep.
that's nice because you're limited on space. So I like had can't like hats off to the ones who live in a tiny home without any other additional like shed or something.
I don't
Wow.
know how they do it.
I don't know either because I love the
No.
shed.
I and I've got a great hack. You want a hack?
Yeah.
The best thing that, because I've been in other people's houses and tiny houses, and I'll see that they, like on their stairs, like up to their loft area, they'll have their laundry soap. And one day it just dawned on me, this is so simple, but please store your laundry supplies inside your empty washing machine.
Oh, I would never think of that.
I know, but that's what I've been doing that for about a year. And it's like, oh my goodness, why didn't I
Yeah.
think of that sooner?
I would never think of it like because if you have the big jug or even the
Right. It fits
container.
in there. It fits right in there.
Yes, and when you're ready to use it, you can easily
Take it
pull it
out.
out, set it down, it washes, put it back in there. That's a great little hack.
It is. And
Trying
we
to
use our empty clothes dryer is our pantry for bread and chips.
Oh, wow. That is really interesting.
Isn't
I
that
love it.
funny?
Yeah, and like using the space too, like our where we have the little stairs area. Well, we kind of
Yes.
have like a little. Well, by ours, your design is different, but we have that little hall, like the little. I guess you go up the stairs and you have the side little walls, and even there,
Yes.
like I love my calendars and things, and like there's
Yes.
I would put our calendar like stuff over there, and trying to think about one of my other favorite hacks have been the space in between the wash or the fridge and the wall, like the
Yes.
tiny gap where I put my cans, that rolling thing that have my cans on. That's been one of
Oh
my
yeah,
favorite.
yeah.
That little
Yeah.
tiny
See, our
space.
space isn't that big. So I keep my broom in there.
Oh yeah, and I have my broom wet. Like my broom goes in between the washer, where the washer and dryer. That little tiny gap between the wall is where I like keep my little broom
Okay.
over there. There's all
Isn't
these
that
little
funny?
hacks, and it's so fun to tour other people's places because you get some really good ideas of how people store things and make their space fit in with like their hobbies. And I just think it's so fun. I love touring all of the tiny homes. I still do.
Oh, I do too. And I think that would be one of our biggest recommendations to people that are considering this. Go look, and if you can find a little neighborhood where people are friendly enough to let you in, just look and see what people are doing,
Yeah.
and get your ideas. Like, I'll get ideas from you, you might get an idea from me, and
Mhm.
the people around us. um, I mean, that's anything though. I mean, I'm never afraid to ask someone, what do you do about this or what about that? And
Yeah, and people love to, for the most part, people love to give
They
you
do.
advice and teach you and show you the things that bring them joy. So don't be afraid to do that. That's going to make you be smarter about the decisions that you make
That's
and have
exactly right.
regrets.
That's
Yeah.
exactly right.
Well, that's all my questions, Susan. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Oh, I've loved it. I love you though, Angela.
I love you too. I feel so blessed to have you guys as neighbors. Like, I know it was a divine thing, like how we ended
I
up.
think so.
All right, y'all. I hope that you really enjoyed that episode. And if you want to follow Susan's work, you can find her at hopehearthome.com. And you can also find all of her books there, including her one about her tiny home journey. And then her information is also in our show notes. If you click on the description of this episode, you will see that information there. All right, I hope you have an awesome day, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.